Happy Epiphany. Epiphany means revelation, and we've already had a few of those this morning, right? Things we did not know about people in our community and the gifts and talents that they have to bring. Appreciate all of your willingness to share. I'm hoping that when we say happy holidays, that includes happy Epiphany, because that one doesn't really roll off the tongue, and it's not one that we typically think of, and yet it is certainly part of this festive season. And it's perfectly appropriate that we celebrate Christmas around the world on Epiphany, because in many nations, this is actually the day, technically it was 2 days ago. The 12th day of Christmas is, in fact, Epiphany. So we're a couple days late to get here together on a Sunday to celebrate. But in many nations, because this is the story of the Magi, which even glimpses of it sounded familiar in a different language, that this is the day, this is the story that prompts the giving of gifts, because the Magi were the ones who came and presented gifts to the child. And it's always interesting to see how stories get adapted and changed within given cultures. The Holly and the Ivy is a lovely song that describes how holly came to be associated with the holidays, right? Because of the red berry that resembles the blood of Christ, and the sharpness and all of that gets woven into these lyrics that help explain why people in England identified this native plant and found meaning in creation, found meaning that would apply to the story of Christ. And so people find different things in their natural world and in their given context, no matter where they live in the world. You find ways to relate to the Christ story and the givenness of God's work in the world, depending on where you live. And so this is the day, too, when we remember that, as Melissa said, that the gift of the Christ child was not just for the local Jewish community in this small town. It was not just for the friends and neighbors, but that in fact it was travelers from the East, scholars from a different religion, different ethnicity, that God was also being revealed to. That is the gift of Epiphany. And so it's a great day to remember and to reflect on, this is not a nationalistic story. This is not a story about just a personal gift from God or a nationalistic gift from God. This is a gift to the world, right? And that's the true story of the Magi and this gift of Epiphany. So for Matthew's writer, this is critically important, not only that it is a worldwide thing, but that God might be doing a new thing in Jesus Christ, but that it is also deeply rooted in God's saving acts throughout history. So Matthew is constantly bringing in Old Testament references. And so there are kind of reflections that you'll see if you hearken back to Old Testament Joseph, Joseph of the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. That Joseph had dreams. That's how he got in good with Pharaoh. He had these dreams that he interpreted for Pharaoh. And so that Joseph was a dreamer. And then Matthew's Joseph, the adoptive parent of the Christ child, is also a dreamer. Right? He gets these revelations. The angel comes and speaks to this Joseph in dreams. It's a continuation of the way God works to reveal messages for Matthew's writer. And similarly, the part that we usually leave out, particularly of the children's books versions of the Magi's visit, is that they go home another way because ultimately Herod actually orders the slaughter of all children under 2. And so that's actually the clearest indication that we have that it probably wasn't an infant. It wasn't just a few days later that they didn't see the infant child. It probably took a couple of years, because in Matthew's scripture reading, it talks about, and you can see in your script there, that the Magi came to the house and saw Mary and the child, but there's not a mention of a manger, and Herod's decree that all male children under 2 years of age is an indication that it had been a little bit, right? Probably a couple of years. And so that harkens to, if you remember the story of Moses, right? Moses is placed in the water of the Nile because all male children were being killed. So this is another time when Matthew takes this ancient Hebrew story and pulls it forward into the story of what God is doing now through the gift of Jesus. And so there are lots of different parallels, and given Matthew's desire to connect the Hebrew story to the current story, I'll be reading some Hebrew scripture here in a little bit. And that reading from today's lectionary, excuse me, this is sliding down this morning, is going to be from the prophet Isaiah. And the prophet Isaiah is often referred to as the fifth gospel because there are so many parallels. There are so many times and places. If we look at the root of the whole Jesse tree that we talked about during the Advent season and the genealogy that Matthew includes, that is very much linked to the prophet Isaiah. And Isaiah isn't just one book. It's a compilation of all sorts of different prophecies, and it spans a large amount of time. And the reading for today's lectionary is from the 60th chapter, which is actually the third Isaiah. Right? So in this one book, there's tons and tons of prophecies. And third Isaiah is written to a particular people who have themselves been on a journey. So this population, this writing, is for people who were kicked out of their homes, right? Just like Mary and Joseph are about to be. They have had to leave everything that they knew. Their way of life has been destroyed. The temple was destroyed. There are wars, and they've been kicked out. And they lived in exile in Babylon. But they're back. They got to come back. They have returned from exile. And, their expectations are like, sweet. Right? And I think in part of even modern day Jewish people, right? So they're in the diaspora, they're all over the world, and then after World War II, many go back, right? And they create this Jewish nation, and there had to be this sense of like, yes, we are here, we are back. God is going to restore us to our former glory. Does the Middle East and current Israel look like a land of peace and prosperity to you? Yeah, okay, good. Then you're paying attention, right? So they get back, and this is in 537 before the Christian era, before the Common Era, right? They get back from exile, and it isn't all magically better. It doesn't all go back to this restored glory. It's hard. Because I don't know if you know this, but creating a nation or just a community, getting people to agree on religious and economic and political structures and processes, that's not easy. And so this group of people that has been on this journey finally reaches their destination, and it looks nothing like what they had in mind. And so they start to spiral. They start to spiral into despair and hopelessness and bickering and fighting back and forth. And it's enough to make you wonder, what was it that we had hoped for in the first place? Maybe you caught a little glimpse of that over these last few weeks during your own holiday season. Maybe you had the chance to get back together with family and remember, oh, we got along a lot better when we weren't together. I mean, hypothetically. Maybe you got the gift that you were desperately hoping for, and you realize that it didn't actually fix your life and all of your problems. I love the saying that wherever you go, there you are. So sometimes the things that are causing our problems are actually within us, and as much as we try to run away from them and we go on our journey to a different place, unfortunately, we are still the ones who are on that journey, and we bring all of those issues right back with us. We see it also in the church universal and in individual congregations too, right? There are exiles who return, expecting things to look. I know I have been in congregations that were, 175 years old, and people might come back for a Christmas celebration and be very upset that the pews had been rearranged, or that, the music was different, because what they wanted to come back to was exactly the same as they left, even though they were only there once every 3 or 4 years because they lived out of town. We also have people who might be on their own journey to a new place. Maybe they haven't been there before, and they come looking for something. They saw something in the heavens or experienced something within their own hearts, and they decided to step out and to go on a new journey and cross the terrifying threshold of a new place and come in. And then it's an unfamiliar world. And sometimes we let people in and say, come on in, we'd love to have you here to learn how to look like us and act like us and sing like us and pray like us. And they have different expectations or different experiences, and we look around and they've quietly slipped out another door and gone home by another way. We can risk becoming like the religious leaders under Herod. They were deeply religious. They had studied the scriptures. This is where the Magi go to find out what the scriptures say about where the king is to be born. And we can have a generation that is coming to look for an encounter with the living God, and they approach scriptures from a different vantage point. They have different experiences of oppression and different experiences of privilege. They come appreciating different musical styles or communicating differently. They come longing to make an impact in the world, and they walk into churches and find bickering over how we're going to meet the fuel bill and how we're going to put a new roof over a building that sits empty for 3 or 6 days a week. And we wonder, well, where did they go? Why didn't they stick around? And sometimes I wonder if we don't say to some people, not in this congregation ever, but I wonder sometimes if in the Church Universal we don't every once in a while say, you know what? Okay, you go find Christ at work in the world. You go find where God is being revealed, and then come back and you let us know, and we'll do our best to kill it. I mean, it might threaten the system that we have in place. It might counteract the traditions that we hold to be so sacred. It might not comply with the power structure that we have. And sometimes the Herod that we know is more comfortable than the Jesus that we don't. See, this is a new year, and so we're all on a journey. right? And some of us have already found that welcome to 2023, guess what? It is just as crappy as 2022 was. I mean, full moon, seasonal affective disorder, magical things didn't just happen overnight. Like, here we are, and it's still us. I am still bringing myself to the same party. So some returned exiles are just going to stay put and despair over what we thought would have been better by now. There's a writer, Michael Mangus, and he says that God is always calling us to grow and change and move to another level of spiritual maturity. And he says, the direction I am to go is not always clear. And I don't know about you, but I've been known to say, like, growth, personal growth, spiritual growth, man, that's hard. I don't want any of that. That is hard work, and it challenges me to actually think about myself and the me that I keep bringing on these journeys and that keep being more difficult than I want them to be. And so for some of us, that reality just keeps us from going anywhere. I'm just going to stay put, and I'm going to, scroll Facebook, or I'm going to play video games, or I'm going to do my thing because I don't have the energy for spiritual growth. It's too challenging, and I probably don't like where it's going to take me. So we can talk ourselves into like laying prostrate, as the kings, bow in adoration of the Christ child, and that adoration can quickly turn into a little nap over on the side. And so this is the context when this prophet Isaiah starts talking, when people have gotten in despair with themselves, with each other, with the world around them, or they've become so kind of complacent with where they are that there is no more growth, and they're just hunkered down. And this is the prophecy that Isaiah gives to these people. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen over you. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look around. They all gather together. They come to you. Your sons shall come from far away, and your daughters shall be carried on their nurses' arms. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the sea shall be brought to you. The wealth of the nations shall come to you. A multitude of camels shall cover you, the young camels of Midian and Ephah. All those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and frankincense, and shall proclaim the praise of the Lord. Boy, that's hard to believe when you're taking a nap or you're in the depths of despair. Arise in expectation and see what is not yet true. The verb tenses that are brought here as this past tense, your light has come, it's already here. Though darkness covers the earth and gloom the nations, the Lord will shine upon you, and nations will come. But they might come a different way, and they might come with different expectations. And maybe, just maybe, that's how, in fact, God will be at work. Mangus suggests as one of his personal and spiritual growth exercises that you write your own obituary. And in part, you do that to see who that person is that you want to be. Right? So if you want to write in your obituary that you were a person of faith, then you might need to do some work on that now. Right? And I think about the same thing from a congregational perspective or from the church universal. If you want to be able to say, we were a congregation focused in justice and passion for transforming the lives of people living in poverty or experiencing oppression, then that starts kind of now, right? Mangus says, when I choose that person in the future that I would like to become, then I have defined, in a sense, the route that I desire to take. So Isaiah suggests that we see what is not yet true and then work to make it as though it is true. And that's kind of what it means to be a people of courage and faith and hope, right? The instruction is not to look back, and that is so difficult because we want to look back to the days of the temple in Jerusalem in all its glory, and we want to look back to the 60s when pews were full to overflowing, and we want to look back to the baby in the manger and not the troublesome 2-year-old. But the journey, the instruction, is to envision this future when all people gather. Because our journeys aren't just about us. No journey really is. Our journey is about a community. Whether we think we embark on it alone or not, there are always others because we are interwoven. And when we become more spiritually aware as individuals, then our congregations do as well. And then we spend less time focusing on what we don't have inside and more time looking outside to what the world needs and where those magi are moving and going and where they are finding God at work. And when we spend less time focusing on what we think we deserve than on what God has withheld from us, and more time asking God how we can share what we have with those who have less, whether that's material possessions, joy, hope, love. Taking a global perspective is deeply humbling and inspiring. The Magi have a long journey ahead, as Melissa mentioned. It is different than the one that they've already completed. They don't get to go back by the same route. They don't get to follow the familiar landmarks. They got to forge a whole different path. And Mary and Joseph have to now run away and flee the country because bad things are going to happen when the power structure gets threatened. And so they have to identify a new route, a new way of being in this world. And Isaiah's neighbors have to just cross the street and talk to the people who have different ideas of the economic and political and religious structure and the way that should exist. And I don't know what 2023 looks like for you or for this faith community. But I do think that Mangus is right, and I think that God is always calling us to grow and change and move to another level of spiritual maturity. And I know that we can't go back, that the windshield is much larger than the rearview mirror for a reason, that God's continuing work does continue, as Matthew makes the points with reflecting back, and yet there is always this new thing that is coming because God's self is the same, and God continues to work for renewal and restoration and continues to work for justice and for peace, and God continues those things in a new and different way. And so the journey commences with us determining what is it that we hold on to and what is it that we let go of. Because we can't go back. We can only go forward, but it assures us that God's light, that has come. And that we can choose to wake from our nap and to courageously arise, for God's light has come. Amen.